Jeunesse embrace innovative volunteerism.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Isra Idris, and I'm super thrilled to be with you here to celebrate the International Youth Day. Without further ado, let me introduce to you our honorable guest for the event. We're going to start with Dr. Richard Moonen, who is the African Regional Climate Change Coordinator at the United Nations Environmental Program. He is responsible for guiding the actualization of UNEP climate resilient development strategy for Africa in a manner that ensures well-being. He's also led in providing technical guidance at the national or regional levels for country, state, and non-state actors to adapt key non-environment innovative enablers for effectively and efficiently upscale climate actions that unlock tangible and prioritize socioeconomic benefits for the communities. So welcome, Dr. Richard. With the theme of this year being on International Youth Day being transforming food systems, I'm really interested to know from you, why do you think food systems is very important, and what is your vision for the Africa continent playing a role in this transformation?
Thank you very much for the question, and it's a great pleasure, first of all, to be here today. And thanks to SIT Concordia for bringing all of us together to discuss this very important issue. I'll start with an African proverb which goes that being in a forest and failing to see the trees is a curse. So from your question, if we just look across the entire world, revamping food systems is something that is long overdue. From 2015, each and every year, 10 million people annually have actually been added to those who are already facing hunger. And in 2020, where the COVID-19 pandemic actually hit the entire globe, we saw between 70 to 160 million people added to the hunger list. And altogether, globally, just in 2020, 2.4 billion citizens across the world either did not have access to nutritious food or were hungry. So when you put that within the context of Africa, we are talking at a time when we have 257 million people going to bed each and every day hungry. And this is happening at a time when you add the COVID-19 equation. It changes the whole dynamic, because we're talking climate change, which we are seeing the calamities already, whether it is drought or floods that are already affecting the continent. And with the latest IPCC report that was released on Monday, showing that the world have only 20 years to hit 1.5 degrees, and that is going to be catastrophic for Africa. The point then is revamping food systems is no longer a luxury, but an urgent need that is long overdue, but it cannot be done using the narrative that we need to produce and produce and produce. We need to look at four aspects. The first is the continent of Africa today, as we speak, is suffering post-harvest losses, costing the continent 48 billion US dollars. So the narrative of production is obsolete. We must then be able to focus on reversing the post-harvest losses that are costing the continent. The second aspect is that most of the time, the discussion around food systems misses the biggest constituencies that we're supposed to focus on, which is the informal sector that is responsible for over 80% of the jobs that are created in the continent. And also, as we're speaking, 80% of the food that is produced is by smallholder farmers. Most of them are in the informal sector. And more importantly, also the constituents of young people when it comes to solutions. And that's the third point, devising solutions to address the aspects of food insecurity and also ensure that we tap across the entire global value chain. We need to tap into the youthful constituency and inspire them to devise innovative solutions to close the gaps that we're currently seeing today. And the last point that is very, very important to ensure that Africa's solutions are not just Africa's solution, but also global solutions, is that we cannot devise solutions to address the challenges in the food system ignoring climate change. We cannot do that while ignoring climate change, because the continent is already suffering over 40% of agricultural failure and challenges as a result of the changing climate from the data that we have. And therefore, every solution must be climate proof the entire agro value chain And that's how food systems can actually be vibrant and resilient under the changing climate.
Thank you so much, Dr. Richard. I definitely see where is that coming from, and the need also for us in the continent to have some data to back up the need for that kind of transformation to move it forward as well. I want to tap a little bit into the subject of course, the involvement of youth and unemployment and all of these areas. And Dr. Richard, like young people in Africa under the age of 5, they represent 60% of the population. However, it's the same segment or group or age group that has the highest rate of unemployment as well, which might be a little bit discouraging for some people. But in terms for yourself, you've talked about how, often before about the opportunities that and the vision that you have for African youth as well, and the untapped potential, let's say. So, what would be your vision for African youth in terms where it relates to climate change, mitigation, poverty reduction, and food security?
Thank you very much, Ezra, for the question. My vision is contextualized in an African proverb, which goes thus that every adversity carries with it the seeds of equal or greater benefit. Challenges are disguised opportunities. And the changing climate, despite the fact that it is a challenge, is actually a disguised opportunity, especially for those who can be able to devise solutions to turn those challenges into the opportunities that do exist. I mentioned earlier the 48 billion US dollars that has been lost in the continent as a result of post-harvest losses. Those are opportunities that are getting down the drain each and every day. And they do not need complicated solutions. They need simple solutions that are accessible to the communities and to the informal sector. But what is needed is to engage willing youth. What is needed is a heart of selflessness, a heart of service. What is needed is that passion that we can then be able to come together and leverage on what we have to start devising solutions. And to engage young people through that means, what we did was to devise a mindset change tool called innovative volunteerism, which is a very simple idea that you leverage on your skill, retool your skill, and adapt it in such a way that it can tap into a very simple solution like a simple solar dryer, where we're guiding young people to develop this solar dryer and decentralize them to communities. And what we are seeing, these young people are not only devising the solar dryers, they're decentralizing to communities and engaging the community and forming people in this community into cooperatives. And they are making money as a result of drying their produce and increasing the life shield, as well as the youth are putting more money in their pockets and helping reduce post-harvest losses. That's how wealth is created, and they are creating employment for themselves. Simple briquettes where agricultural waste actually being turned into briquettes that are replacing charcoal. Thus, they are tapping into a 20 billion industry, because the charcoal industry in the continent is worth 20 billion. But they are turning that by providing alternatives that are replacing charcoal, that are reducing indoor pollution that is killing over 600,000 Africans. So these simple solutions that can actually be put in place are what each and everyone can do. And the young people seeing this, regardless of educational level, whether with a PhD or a master, it doesn't matter. Providing these help to lower emissions, but at the same time creates opportunities. So the vision is very simple. In every challenge, there is an opportunity. But what each and every young person needs to do, which we are inspiring them to do, is to become selfless and avail themselves to retool their skills so that at least they can create value by devising these solutions and tap into the market, which is the informal sector and the community that needs such alternatives at a cheaper price, and they'll put more money in their pockets. And that's what we've been doing.
Me personally, now I'm very inspired just hearing your say about all of this untapped potential, and what do you think some of the things that we can help the African youth also see? Because you've mentioned something very interesting, which is the transformation in terms of a mindset, which is one of the hardest social behavior change. It's very hard to make people change the way that they see things. So how do you see also us everywhere globally inspiring African youth into taking these opportunities and wanting to be involved in creating a solution for these challenges, as you mentioned, like the post-harvest losses in our own countries? So
The key is that I always use this word, and I will use it again: narrative. Narrative, narrative. The narrative has been about problems, discussing problems, talking about problems without preferring solutions. The narrative has been about complaining and talking of always how we don't have what we don't have, rather than talking about what we have. And what we have is ourselves. What we have is our skill, where we can offer value before others can come into play. So the point is that we need to start inspiring people, because we need also not to brush away the fact that people believe in what they see. They believe in a product, not in processes. They believe in what can be able to address their problems. And so when we get down to the young people and talk about how they need money before they can start, rather than talking about how they need to retool their skills, and from retooling their skills they can offer value, then money will be attracted to, they will attract money. That narrative has not been that way. It's been heavy dollars upfront before action, rather than start with what you have, and then when dollars come, they are going then to help you more because you already know what you want to do, and that can take you forward. And I say this without any fear of contradiction: the narrative of problems and talking about what we don't have to take action is a failed narrative. What we need is a narrative of inspiration that can inspire young people to know they are the solutions they need, to know that they are actually the solutions, that if they unleash the potential that they have in them by retooling their skills, by becoming selfless, and doing that which touches the lives of many other people beyond just themselves, then we will be in the money in terms of opportunities for youth putting more money in their pockets, but at the same time bring climate action impact to scale, because the solutions to climate action will not come elsewhere. They'll come from the innovations from our youth.
thank you, Dr. Monang. What do you see are some of the obstacles that youth are facing when trying to lead climate change?
I think there are a few obstacles, and some of them are actually inherent in the young people. One is lack of passion, the narrative that somebody have to do something for someone all the time without you also using your efforts to do what they can do, is something that have actually been obstructive to allow others to be able to rise up with solutions. That is a fact, because we must understand the purpose of life is to be useful. And to be useful means we need to be able to apply effort, some dedication. And it is only when you have a clear purpose that you can then inspire purposeful passion. And that lack of passion have resulted sometimes in young people not knowing their potential and the ability of what they can be able to do with the talents that they do have. So that has been a big problem, and that's an obstacle. The second one is what I call availability. What people miss, and especially with young people, which I work with a lot of them, is that they forget to know that your biggest ability is your availability. When they call meetings like this one here today, where we saw it on LinkedIn and on Twitter and other social media spaces, how many of them show up to learn? Knowledge is power. Without having knowledge and connecting with people to tap into solutions, you lose the opportunity. They don't avail themselves. And most of the time they sit and complain. And these are very simple aspects that I see them as obstacles. The last one is retooling skills. Having a PhD actually means nothing. I had one 12 years ago. It is when you apply what you've studied that it makes sense. What am I trying to say? Is skills retooling is the biggest premium. Everyone's skill is the biggest premium he or she have got. And when you don't have a skill on something that is relevant today, like I mentioned, climate change challenges are disguised opportunity. Retool skills, learn how to make briquettes. A simple 5 minutes, 10 minutes on a YouTube, you will learn it. And that's what we're engaging young people and guiding them to do. And you will be solving a problem and making money. So the obstacles are actually sometimes inborn. Policy obstacle is there, but when you look across the entire continent, and this is something that a lot of young people don't know, every country, only 2 countries out of the 54 African countries have not ratified the Paris Climate Change Agreement. That means over 90% of the continent have ratified. In these agreements that have been ratified, there are incentives, energy policy incentives, tax breaks for leveraging on clean energy solutions. When I asked these young people, have you read this? They said, read it for what? We want government to help. But there are already tax incentives that are already helping you. So when they don't read, they don't understand all these things. And so sometimes we have to challenge them as we guide them and hold their hand to the next phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Monang. And on the inspiration, let's say, note, I'm interested to know what are some of the youth-led innovations that you felt inspired with?
A lot of them. I mean, I did mention a couple of them when I answered your first and second question. One thing that we need to appreciate of the young people of Africa and even of the globe, but especially of Africa, they are very, very entrepreneurial. They are innovative. They are tech savvy. And once they are guided, you will be amazed to see the kind of innovations they can put in place. We have been guiding them, leveraging on this tool called innovative volunteerism, this mindset change tool that has become an incubation space, where guidance have resulted not only in them developing these innovative climate action solutions of solar dryers, or turning waste to briquettes or to biofertilizers, which are practical examples that are being showcased across the continent today and helping the youth put money. But what we've also noticed is that the innovations around those solar dryers are continuous as they continuously revamp it in such a way that the drying time continually get reduced. Just in Kenya, the other day, young people that we're working with, we guided them and now they have integrated briquettes they actually use a briquette stove to increase the heat and the temperature of the solar dryer. So the time it used to dry without the heat coming from using briquettes and being channeled into the solar dryer was 3 hours. Now it takes 30 minutes. The innovations are being recalibrated every day. But what I usually agree is that it is not absence of innovations or absence of ideas in the African continent. The young people have proven so many times that they are able and capable of doing so. But what has been absent is incentives. And incentives here are not just money. Inspiration to inspire them to know that at least they are following the right path, to guide them. Inspiration and incentives to motivate them to know that at least their future is bright and their dreams are valid. Sometimes they lack all these simple ingredients that can be able to take them forward. And what has also been absent sometimes is what I usually call an implementation platform that can bring all of them together, whereby what someone is doing in Ghana aligning with what a youth is doing in Kenya. When they come together, that collective sharing of ideas can help enhance what a youth is doing in Ghana in developing a solar dryer. And what we have done through the space of innovative volunteerism is that we are getting Kenyan youth, Ugandan youth, DRC youth, Togo youth, cross-hybridizing ideas around this common solution of a solar dryer, around a common solution of briquettes or biofertilizer. And that's how you bring impact to scale. And the common implementation framework that brings like-minded youth with common solutions for common problems is now in place.
Very inspiring. And I'm again going to tap into that a little bit with you. Like, how do you see us creating that platform for information sharing between even the African countries to make sure that we are not only learning from each other context that could be similar in many cases, but we're also making sure that there is evidence in place on our collective efforts to improve the climate change agenda?
I think SIT Concordia is already doing that today. I mean, and this is a space that you can tap into, not only because you are affiliated with an academic institution, but because you are bringing a different kind of narrative that you can convey different actors across the board. There are a lot of platforms across the continent, and I usually argue that it's not an issue of having so many platforms, but it's an issue of speaking one language that at or because we need so many actors on board to be able to bring impact to scale. The changing climate is so enormous that we need everybody on board with different ideas, but with a common philosophy of building resilience of communities and driving socio-economic resilient economies. But what we need more is new knowledge. Like I said earlier, there is no absence of ideas or absence of innovations. If anybody says so, I will ask that person, he or she, to bring the evidence that there is absence of ideas or innovations in the African continent. I disagree from what I see every day. But the absence is these incentives, institutions, and a common implementation framework. So what I think, we need data, and that data needs to be continuously synthesized and integrated into educational curriculum to be picked up so that young people can start to, because data is important. It informs policies, it informs action. But the data being generated at the moment sometimes gets missing. And that mismatch makes policy sometimes to be met without necessarily feeding reality, but just to fill a space. And so we end up having no impact. And so Concordia, Seed Concordia, and others can be able to tap into this space and try to fill the gaps. So that evidence of knowledge is already existing and can always be refined. But to have a common space that brings that knowledge and feed it to inform what is happening as well as inform what is missing in policy, there's really none at the moment.
I cannot agree more on also the great effort that Seed Concordia is also doing to bridge that kind of a gap. If you were in the driving seat, if you are the person to call the shots, let's say, what would be your some of the policies that you will give priority to? What would be your agenda for that kind of a change? Dr. Munen?
Thank you very much, Ezra. The reality is that when you look at the African continent today, the issue is not in absence of policy. I've said this. So this African proverb put it in perspective. Do not look where you fell, but where you sleep. And so if ratification of Paris Climate Change Agreement, every country having a climate smart agriculture, fit-in tariffs, and you name it, policy. So people even jokingly say that Africa is a cemetery for policy. To an extent, that's true. Then the key point then is what is missing? Implementation, implementation, implementation. Why? Those who are actually the constituency of implementers have been missed out in all this, the informal sector and the young people. And so the first thing to be done will be to put in place policy incentives, because policy is the biggest driver of change. But policy and regulation must be preceded with incentives. And incentives must be to inspire what actually has shown to be working on the ground. And that needs proof of concept. And what that means is simple tax breaks, which we have actually seen in some countries. If you take Kenya, for example, in 2016, there was a finance bill that actually waived the value-added tax of 16% on liquid petroleum gas. And that resulted in liquid petroleum gas units, plant units of from 9 to 305 as we speak today. That's the power of a policy incentive. And this year, Finance Bill 2021 showed that actually they have waived the value-added tax on briquettes. That is, if you turn waste to briquettes, you are not going to pay tax. You can trade in this good without actually having to pay tax. So that's one aspect. But there is also a policy instrument that could also be developed, which is to get into a point where most of the time is missing in the continent today. In every community, in the African community, there is what is called a cooperative, or in Yangi, or no matter how it is called, or a Chama in East Africa, but a cooperative where the community comes together and make their savings. What government should do is to de-risk most of these local community financial institutions and give them a stimulus so that they can be able to lend to the informal sector to acquire inputs, especially like a simple solar dryer or inputs like fertilizer, so that organic fertilizer, so that at least they are not straining a lot, but they can then be able to have this, and that ensures accountability and traceability. And the other aspect is to ensure that education, every curriculum in every school must integrate climate action entrepreneurship, because we need to start teaching our young people that the changing climate is where the jobs can be created by you if you learn a skill that is related to that. And those are aspects that are quite very, very important. If we do this, definitely we'll start to bring climate impact change to scale.
I cannot agree more. Last but not least from my list questions before we got into the audience questions, and I'm very mindful of the time as well. So for this last one, we talked about policy now, and I believe that we covered a lot, very interesting topics. But what do you think are other ways beyond policy also that we can support young people with in taking action on food security and climate issues? Dr. Mounen?
Yeah, thanks again, Ezra. I think the first thing is, I mean, the soft aspects are actually one of the biggest challenge that I can say that we face, because I always say that if the software is not right, no matter how excellent the hardware is, nothing works. If you have a car and there is no fuel in it, nothing works. And that is passion. I call passion the new currency of now. We must start to instill and inspire young people to ignite their passion. If they don't ignite their passion, I've said this so many times, throw money on a passionless human being and no results will occur. The money gets finished and nothing works. These are realities, and we can't spin about it. So we must instill and inspire passion and help to make sure that at least we aspire to inspire as many people as possible. The second aspect, which is important, is self-discipline. Self-discipline to focus and retool skills, to learn a trade, to learn something new that can help contribute to the solution space in turning a climate challenge into an opportunity. No matter how little it is going to solve a community problem. The third is building a resilient mindset. And that goes back to the point I made earlier. The complaining mentality should stop. We have social media today, which is a space for each and everyone to participate in preferring solutions. And I urge young people out there, use social media to communicate solutions, not complaining. Use social media to learn. In social media is where your partners are. In social media is where your market is. In social media is where you can build alliances to create your own climate action enterprises. And we must develop this resilient mindset to know that challenges are disguised opportunity. We should not faint when challenges comes our way, but we should take them and turn them into opportunity. But you can only do that when you have acquired a skill that can create value and that will put money in your pocket. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mounen. So for now, we're going to take a few questions from the audience. For the first one, I think this is addressed to Dr. Mounen. Like you talked about actually about COVID-19 and earlier about COVID-19 and how it kind of increases the burden on the continent when it comes to food systems. So the question here is how the youth can recover from the COVID-19 impact and what opportunities exist for them. And what opportunities exist for them currently. The question is like, for example, in the UN system.
Thank you very much. The youth are already recovering from COVID-19 through what they were doing before COVID came in 2020. In Buganda Kingdom in Uganda, where we're working with youth, they were developing solar dryers. And during COVID-19, what we have documented is that most of the young people who were not part of voluntarily volunteering themselves to learn skills and to devise solar dryers were out of work. But these young people were making money because the solar dryers they developed, they were using a communal spirit in communities whereby the community was paying little money to use those solar dryers. So the young people were putting money in their pocket. The community was drying their food so that it doesn't get wasted and putting more money in their pocket as well as food on the table. That is working. It was the same in Nigeria. It was the same in Togo. It was the same in Ghana. So that has proven that when solutions that are needed by the community are in place, even in emergencies, there will be that resilience and sustainability of action that can help. And what we are doing with our work within UNEP is that we are leveraging on the ingenuity and innovativeness of young people and guiding them and giving them the skills and the tools so that at least they can sustain with solutions as we guide them through this logic of innovative volunteerism. Of course, within the UN system, there is really also the United Nations Volunteers Program, but not everybody can be part of it. We have over 7.4 billion people in the world, but everybody can be part of innovatively volunteering his or herself to learn skills, to devise solutions. And that is the kind of thinking, especially within the climate change program, which I had, that we are trying to engineer so that everyone can be engaged, regardless of which community or which country it comes from, to be guided to then become part and parcel of devising climate action solutions.
And Dr. Munan, you talked a lot about inspiration and how we can also help the youth, see the potentials that they can tap into and they can also gain from it. There's a question here about how can agriculture be made cool to the young generations?
Culture is already made cool to the young generation, but the problem has been the narrative. And I said this very bluntly. It's about production, 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 where we made you to think that you need to have a farm or a piece of land before you can engage in agriculture. That's a false narrative. Agriculture in the continent, we lose 48 billion every year because of post-harvest losses. That means we're producing enough. What does that mean? The young people should intervene with ideas and innovations in reversing those post-harvest losses. So we are seeing that they're developing ICT, information communication technology applications that are connecting farmers to market. In Kenya, here, young people who work with develop what is called Bango Pamoja, where they are helping farmers to have access to inputs to fertilizer, access to solar dryers, where you sit with just with the touch of a phone. That is happening. That's already cool. Agriculture is cool, where we are seeing young people actually who don't have anything to do with a farm or with land, purchasing cassava that has been produced by mothers in villages and turning it to cassava flour. That's making agriculture cool, where they are buying already products that are produced in communities and turning them, adding value to them by drying in solar dryers and marketing to other countries, leveraging on already the Africa continental free trade. That's making agriculture cool. So agriculture cool is happening. And we should build on it rather than asking whether it is how it's going to be made cool to young people.
I have a hand, Lorden.
Hi, I was writing my question, but I heard you were about to wrap up, so I just raised my hand instead. Yes. Thank you. So my question might be a bit more relevant for Dr. Richard, because throughout the panel, you both talked about the importance of like having more, if I quote Peyton, bottom up mentality. And Richard, you also talked about how it's important to change the narrative into more solutions-based mindset. So I was wondering, putting those two elements together, if you had, Dr. Richard, ideas onto how we could throw opportunities to Africans, for example, and placing them more as like people who have a lot of knowledge to share to the North rather than the other way around, because I feel like we're often focused on that dynamic. So yeah, that was my question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think, that is a very amazing question. I think the point is this, I always say this, we do not do development for people. People do development for themselves. Our role in whatever capacity is to facilitate and inspire people so that at least they can take what they are doing to the next level. What do I mean by this? The reality is, and I'll still go back to what I said, there is no absence of solutions on the ground, but there are gaps. Our intervention should then be to build on what is happening to close the gaps without necessarily reinventing the wheel. And the focus should also to build on what has worked to help inform policy and drive policy change. And that's where data becomes very, very important. The top-down approach has been what has been missing the point, where policy proliferation sometimes fills a gap but does not translate to touching a mother's life in a village. I always ask this question in anything: how does it affect a mother and a young boy and girl in a village? Regardless of where we are, it doesn't really matter. So the point is that in every aspect we want to intervene, let's always ask that question: how does it build on what was already happening in village A, and then take it to the next level that can then better the lives of each and everyone? And I think that kind of spirit is the kind of way that we can then be able to bring impact to scale. But to do that, we must build on institutions that already exist. And in this case, communal cooperatives. Let's tap into that. That has been missing in the equation of either climate financing or climate discourse. The second is, let's make sure that at least we tap into the ingenuity of young people and make them see themselves as a solution provider. And there is just one aspect here that I mentioned it, and I want just to recalibrate it again. The young people sometimes have nearly everything it takes in terms of innovations and ideas, but they don't work together. And that's a very big problem. Collective, the biggest individual action is collective action. Alone, we can only do as much, but together we'll do much more. And I think that goes back to that narrative. So if we continuously drive those two aspects, then gather what is happening at the community with what the youth are doing and push for a policy change so that at least we can have the right incentives to drive. But when we start bottom up, it will just be at good and it will end in some areas that may not necessarily be able to take transformation forward. That's what we've learned from our work, the work we do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Richard Moonen, Peter Mitchell, and thank you all of our audience, Seed Concordia, for organizing this event. I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did and felt inspired. So that would be the end of our panel discussion. So thank you everyone for joining us. And as I said, I hope you enjoyed the event.
To offer value to him by being useful to fellow man, and to punish those who that bury their talent. This is innovative volunteerism. It is for you to make a difference.